I started tracking every game I played in 2017, around the first time I went live on Twitch. Since then, I've finished 100 games, and I'm here to talk about them all. Before I start the video, I want to speak very briefly on who I am, why I'm making this video, and how my review scale works. My name is Ford, and I go by Fatal Ford, as seen here on YouTube, on Twitch, and on basically every game I play, and I have been gaming all my life. I just turned 40, so I am officially a certified old person now, and gaming is my passion. I did say I would clarify why I'm making this video, and my goal is very simple. If one person watches this and on my recommendation decides to play a new game and then they enjoy it, my mission will be complete. As far as what's in the video and what's not, I game on PC, on Nintendo consoles, and in VR, so these are mostly the games you'll see here. I don't own any PlayStation consoles, so you're not going to see me reviewing any of the big Sony exclusives. Next, I have beaten almost every one of these games, but not all of them. I generally view beating a game as rolling credits, but since there are a few exceptions, I'll point those out when they come up. Now, before I get started with any reviews, I do have a few housekeeping notes. I am making this video to celebrate video games, and every game I'm presenting here is something that I went out of my way to play with the expectation of enjoying it, so you're not going to see many low scores. I'll be scoring on a 5-star scale, with the score relating to how strongly I recommend to anyone to play that particular game. My opinion is obviously baked into the score, but mostly I'm scoring each game with others in mind, and the scores have the following meanings. 5 is a masterpiece that I recommend to anyone and everyone. A 4 is a great game that I recommend to all fans of the genre. A 3 is a good game that I do recommend, but with some reservations. 2 is a game I do not recommend, and a 1 is avoid at all costs, but there's none of those in this video. I'll be presenting the games in mostly alphabetical order, and here's the entire list. It's somewhere over here. Feel free to pause and browse. With all that said, let's get into the video. A little to the left is a cozy, chill, and very satisfying puzzler centered around the theme of household organization, where you'll find yourself neatly arranging junk drawers, straightening paintings on a wall, and peeling labels off of fruit. Most puzzles also offer multiple ways to solve them. You might arrange a set of keys from shortest to tallest, then by color, and then again by simplest to most complex. On paper, this game sounds very mundane, but in practice, it scratches your brain in all the right ways. And speaking of scratching, you'll occasionally be interrupted by an adorable and precocious house cat. A bonus is the relaxing and atmospheric soundtrack. 4.5 stars. Absolum takes the beat-em-up genre and adds some much-needed depth and replayability. At first glance, Absolum looks like another bog-standard side-scrolling punch-up, but beneath the hood is a deeper-than-usual combat system and a pretty decent roguelite. You may not think that adding parries and dodges to this style of game would make a huge difference, but for me, these techniques added depth and mastery that no other game in the genre ever has. For example, usually, beat-em-up boss fights are an excuse for a big baddie to chew through a few of your lives, or quarters, but in Absolum, if your knowledge and timing are good enough, you can defeat any boss without taking a point of damage. The rogue elements and branching path gameplay definitely help boost the desire to play this game again and again, as you can try different builds with different characters, all 4 of which feel fun and distinct. If I could ask for one thing that would make this game a 5, I'd love to see a sequel to Absolum where builds can synergize between both players. One of the few small elements I found lacking in this game. Also, I played Absolum with an arcade stick for that retro feel, and really enjoyed it. On a final side note, the music in the Underking fight absolutely rips. 4.5 stars. Angerfoot is a slick, manic, fast-paced shooter with a comical and grotesque visual style set to aggressive, heart-pounding, hardstyle house music. Levels blast by in this do-or-die, mile-a-minute run-and-gun. The gunplay is simple and tight, but the smooth speed of the game makes flow-state creativity possible at every moment. Simple challenges urge you to replay levels, with time challenges posing an especially attractive draw for me and sending me into one more try mode as I whittled seconds off of my playthrough. The silly humor and tight gunplay are what works best in this game. Killing enemies by kicking doors into their face and enemies twerking on your dead body are highlights. There isn't much story in this game, as your mission is to wipe out 4 gangs to reclaim 4 pairs of iconic sneakers. Not everyone will love a simple game like this, where levels often take 30 seconds to complete, but fans of Doom and Neon White will almost certainly enjoy this one. 3.5 stars. When the pandy struck in 2020, Animal Crossing was the warm blanket that kept the world cozy and connected. Released hilariously on the same day as Doom Eternal, New Horizons was my first foray into the Animal Crossing series, and I really enjoyed my time with it. The cutesy aesthetic and iconic music definitely stuck with me, and I enjoyed the cozy everyday life of maintaining my island, developing my friendships with the fellow islanders, and working to pay back the loan that Tom Nook offers you at the start of the game. By the way, a zero-interest loan in this economy? Tommy Nook is a real one for that. Terraforming the island was a tremendous surprise, and I was shocked at how the day-night cycle of the game really hooked me into that classic one more day grind. 4.5 stars. In Animal Well, you're a nondescript blob that has to wander an ever-expanding maze of corridors filled with spooky and creepy animals that are more than ready to send you back to respawn. One evil genius, Billy Basso, built this game engine and developed a world that is all at once rich, alluring, complex, beautiful, haunting, serene, threatening, and an absolute joy to get lost in. Speaking of being lost, the depth of secrets in this game is truly mind-blowing. There are puzzles that took gamers from all over the world weeks of cooperation to solve. I am not typically a completionist, but this is one of those rare games that I wanted to do everything in, and I made sure to see every corner of the game world. It's also worth mentioning that this is the first game published by Big Mode, the studio owned by YouTube legend Video Game Donkey. And if this project is any hint of what's to come, Donkey may be a tastemaker for the ages. 5 stars. Arizona Sunshine is definitely my most played VR game. In it, you'll find yourself trying to survive a zombie apocalypse and escape the Arizona desert, looking for any safe haven or signs of fellow survivors. It offers a surprisingly lengthy 2-player co-op campaign that was better than I expected, and features a 4-player survival mode where you and your friends defend your ground as waves of zombies pour in from all sides. Gunplay and weapon handling are slick and intuitive, which goes a very long way in a VR game. I know not everyone has a VR headset, but for those who do, Arizona Sunshine is one of the greats. 4 stars. Back 4 Blood is a spiritual successor to Valve's iconic zombie shooter series, Left 4 Dead. Like its predecessor, Back 4 Blood features 4-player co-op with a satisfyingly lengthy campaign, a compelling mix of interesting, threatening zombies, and plenty of firepower to dispatch them with. From a conceptual standpoint, Back 4 Blood faces an interesting development challenge for Turtle Rock. where they can't sway too far from the flavor of the Left 4 Dead series without losing their core audience, but they still need to add enough for the game to even have a reason to exist. That being said, Back 4 Blood nails most of what makes the original games great, while adding just enough to keep it interesting. My favorite new addition was the card system, which allows you to tailor your playstyle around guns, melee weapons, or utility. Ultimately, I think they passed the assignment. 3.5 stars.
Let's say hello to Jimbo.
Balatro is the best poker deck builder roguelite I've ever played. It's also the only poker deck builder roguelite I've ever played. In all seriousness, like Animal Well, Balatro is an unbelievable achievement in gaming from just one developer, although the two games couldn't be more different. In Balatro, victory requires you to clear ever-growing blinds, meaning you'll have to score more points while you attempt to make poker hands like pairs, straights, and flushes. Throughout a given playthrough, you'll gain the ability to tailor your deck by adding and removing cards and improving the scores for given hands. But the main gameplay hook revolves around game-breaking jokers, which you can collect and combine to really ramp up your scoring potential. Featuring just one deviously catchy musical track, razor-sharp game balance, and simple yet surprisingly deep game mechanics, Balatro and its poker joker will get its hooks into you, leaving you with that just one more run feeling for hours on end. Simply put, Balatro is a perfect game. 5 stars. Ball Pit is the best Brick Breaker roguelite I've ever played. It's also the only Brick Breaker roguelite I've ever played. If you're experiencing deja vu, don't blink because yes, I am making the same joke twice in a row. In another coincidence, Ball Pit is another strong example of what one developer can achieve in this medium. And yes, I pronounce it Ball Pit. Not only is the gameplay fun and finely tuned, but the rogue elements are very well thought out, with all sorts of fun ways to play, while the game gives you random offerings. Ball Pit also has 16 characters to play, each of which changes and breaks the game in unique ways. A special treat is the town-building, brick-breaking mini-game that you play between runs, which is how you rank up your account and various characters. If I were to knock this game, I would point out that Ball Pit has no meaningful narrative, and although it has a distinct visual aesthetic all its own, I would say that this game is missing some of the style and visual flair that sets apart my 5-star games. But it's not far off the mark. 4.5 stars. What can I say about one of the most iconic games in history? Set in the deeply compelling underwater dystopia of Rapture, BioShock's Art Deco steampunk aesthetic offers some of the most memorable visuals in the medium. BioShock's world building and storytelling are beyond excellent, and it's all topped off by one of the biggest twists ever seen in a video game. All in all, BioShock is a landmark for a lot of reasons. That being said, this game is definitely showing its age, even if you play the more recent remaster. For one small example, the jump button is Y in this game, which just doesn't feel like a configuration you'd ever see in 2025. Also, the map is genuinely one of the most confusing and frustrating maps I've ever seen, and again, just feels like a relic of its era. If you're interested in gaming history and very into storytelling, BioShock is a must-play. If not, maybe you can skip it. 3.5 stars. Blueprints is a slow burn in every sense of the phrase. Nothing happens quickly in this game, and I mean that in a good way. You'll play as Simon, a 14-year-old boy who inherits a mansion from his grand uncle, which you build anew each day by assigning rooms to a 45-room grid on your search for the elusive Room 46. The rub is, Every night, the mansion resets, so each day, you'll have to rebuild the mansion from scratch. For most players, it will take dozens of runs to succeed, and to learn the language the house is trying to teach you. Often, you'll find yourself walking by the same clue 10 times before it has any meaning to you. The natural progression of your account will help, as this game has some roguelite elements as well. Since the gameplay is run-based, and the offerings the house gives you are random, you'll also need a little luck on your side. I should also mention, this is one of those games where having your Notes app open is almost a prerequisite to success. If you're into puzzle games or walking simulators, and you enjoy a game that slowly reveals its secrets to you, Blueprints is one of the best games 2025 has to offer. 4.5 stars. Born into Fear is a cheap horror game on Steam that gave me more than a few legitimate jump scares. You'll explore an abandoned suburban neighborhood while you try to avoid creepy, shambling mannequins. If you like single-player indie horror games, this is a decent one. 2.5 stars. I'm breaking alphabetical order so that I can talk about the Castlevania games together, and I'll talk about them in the order they were released. Super Castlevania IV, released in 1991 for the Super Nintendo, is a traditional side-scrolling action-adventure platformer from Konami and is a very mixed bag. On the one hand, the atmosphere, music, and art direction are all pretty strong, but on the other hand, the gameplay feels pretty stiff and dated, especially compared with the next entry in the series. If you're a big Castlevania fan, I would say this one is worth your time, especially since you can beat it in just a few hours. 3 stars. Castlevania Symphony of the Night is a stone-cold masterpiece, although it wasn't necessarily seen as such when it released in 1997 for the PlayStation. This is the game that put the Vania in Metroidvania, and rightfully so, as Symphony of the Night is an all-time classic. The platforming and combat are so finely tuned that Alucard feels like he's begging to be added to the Super Smash Bros. Roster. Dracula's Castle is a beautiful and moody location for hours and hours of exploration, where endless secrets await and the flow of unlocking new abilities in order to progress, or often backtrack, is perfectly paced. Then, to top it all off, there's an interesting loot system that actually sprinkles in a healthy and rewarding dose of optional RPG-style grinding. Viewed initially as outdated, in an era where the market was clamoring for anything and everything 3D, Castlevania's reputation has been correctly cemented as that of a masterclass in game design, with a killer soundtrack to match. It's hard to believe that this game and Castlevania IV were released only 6 years apart when they feel light years away from each other. 5 stars. Celeste might be my favorite platformer of all time. The controls are tight and precise, and advanced movement techniques offer tons of room for skill expression. This game also offers one of the most compelling approaches to difficulty I've ever seen. Each room basically exists as its own contained level, and failure only resets you to the start of the room you're in. This means that no matter how badly you fail, you can basically never lose progress in Celeste. Also, you're given tons of options to engage with the game on your terms. On the lighter side, Assist Mode will let you break the game to your liking, offering settings like slower game speed, infinite jumps, or invincibility. Then on the tougher side, once you've completed the game, you can play it back on B-side and C-side difficulties, which make every jump and air dash just that much more treacherous. A setting like Assist Mode might seem like it would make the game unfun, but Celeste's narrative is so worth seeing that I think anything that helps more players experience it is a good thing. All in all, Celeste is one of the best platformers ever made, with an absolutely iconic soundtrack. 5 stars. Chained Together is the first game on this list that I played with my wife, Jessie. She and I really enjoyed this one across a couple of sessions. Although, to be clear, we played with the settings where, if you fall, you can reset to the most recent checkpoint you reached, so I wouldn't say we had the truest experience with this game. We know that games like these can definitely end relationships, and we just wanted to enjoy the challenge in a more forgiving way. Based off of my experience, I had fun playing with Jessie, but nothing about the game itself was all that memorable to me. 3 stars. Cocoon is a one-of-a-kind puzzle game with a mind-bending core mechanic that sees you traveling into and out of worlds within worlds via what I can only call teleportation marbles. I really enjoyed the challenge and pacing of this game, and I found the overall aesthetics beautiful and captivating. If you're a fan of puzzle games, Cocoon is worth your time. 4 stars. Cult of the Lamb is a fascinating combination of ingredients, the whole of which is definitely greater than the sum of its parts. The core gameplay loop is a pretty straightforward hack-and-slash roguelite action game, with combat that I would describe as adequate. However, where Cult of the Lamb really shines is between runs, where you are tasked with playing a grotesque and twisted take on a cutesy village management sim. It starts innocently enough, with villagers collecting wood and foraging for food, but soon, members of the village will defecate in public if facilities aren't maintained, and others will follow behind eating it, making themselves ill if you don't clean in time. You'll also be forced to wrangle with decisions like when to let the elderly die, or when to sacrifice villagers for the sake of morale. It's not the best village sim, and it's not the best action roguelite, but it's a pretty great combination of both, and its aesthetic and art direction definitely set it apart as a one-of-a-kind experience. 4 stars.
Test of a person's true value? Death.
This is the game I played most recently on this list. I don't play a lot of big open-world RPGs, but something about the vibe and aesthetics of Cyberpunk drew me in. Watching the excellent show Edgerunners definitely helped nudge me in the right direction, and I'm grateful I tried it out because I was impressed with Cyberpunk on so many levels. The combat was fun and crisp, the storytelling was excellent, even if I did get a little lost in the corporate espionage from time to time. The world building and mood are top-notch, and the RPG systems run deep and wide in very satisfying ways. I was particularly impressed with the character progression, which seemed to lend itself to dozens of different viable build paths, ranging from a katana-wielding brawler, to a tech-heavy hacker, this game's take on magic, to a sneak assassin pistol headshot monster. And in the build I played, an SMG-wielding bullet hose who basically never has to reload. But as impressive as these systems are, and to hardly even mention all of the cyberware and weapon crafting systems, it's just as impressive to me in how willing the game is to let you never engage with these systems. Don't want to sneak in the back door? Shoot your way through the front. Don't want to bother eating stat-boosting consumables from time to time? Then don't. I certainly didn't. Don't want to bother hacking anything? You don't have to. Each of these systems are worth interacting with, but CDPR leaves you to play in the sandbox how you see fit. After playing this game, I definitely understand and agree with the reputation CD Projekt Red has as one of the preeminent RPG developers in the business. 4.5 stars.
There is a great horror beneath the manor.
Darkest Dungeon can be aptly described in one word: brutal. Permadeath and total party kills are always only one mistake away, and if the dungeon monsters don't kill you, insanity will. In this party-building roguelike, you'll venture deeper and deeper into dungeons, ramping the difficulty to eventually explore the titular Darkest Dungeon. Party composition and positioning are everything in this game, so you'll need to plan carefully. but even more importantly, you'll need to learn to improvise when things go wrong, because they will go wrong. Ultimately, I enjoyed the turn-based combat and the overall challenge of this game, but after many hours, I did find watching the same animations very slow and tedious. I know there are mods to solve this, and I would encourage any player to explore some of the quality of life mods that are out there for this game. Interestingly, this is the first game on the list that I didn't finish. I had a party make it deep into the darkest dungeon, and then got a total party kill, and I didn't have any units anywhere near their level and decided I'd had my fill, and simply hung it up. I mostly enjoyed Darkest Dungeon, but I recommend it with some strong reservations, and in my opinion, this is the perfect example of a 3-star game. 3 stars. Speaking of games I didn't like as much as I hoped to, Dead Cells is an awesome game that simply didn't get its hooks into me. A roguelite action platformer sounds like a game tailor-made to my tastes, and while I did enjoy Dead Cells, for whatever reason, once I had rolled credits, I didn't feel the desire to go back in for more runs. I would definitely still highly recommend this game though, as it is very slick and polished, the combat is top tier, and its pixel art is some of the best I've ever seen. 4 stars. In Deathloop, you're tasked with living the same day again and again in a mid-century modern island, stuck in the retro-futuristic vibe of the 50s, and the loop never ends until you can find a way to assassinate 8 targets within 1 day. Learning all of their routines is fascinating, and learning to off them all in one loop will make you feel like a genius. The gunplay from Arcane is world-class per usual, and it's expertly paired with a host of superpowers that range from invisibility to telekinesis and a short-range teleport, among others, meaning there's endless ways to get the job done in this game. I know humor is subjective, but I found myself laughing quite a good bit playing this game. Ultimately, Deathloop makes reliving the same day again and again a delight and an exceptional ride. 4.5 stars. Death's Door answers the question, what would you get if you took a top-down Zelda game and sprinkled in 2 heaping scoops of Dark Souls inspiration? The answer is a pretty compelling action-adventure game, and another high mark for the sterling reputation of publisher Devolver Digital. You'll play as a Grim Reaper Crow who works a boring dead-end job for the bureaucratic Reaping Commission. But when a soul gets stolen, you'll head out on a grand adventure to bring it back. Don't let the cutesy art style fool you. This game will crush you if you can't get good. And although the combat may be punishing, it always felt fair, and the gameplay is clean and precise. I highly recommend Death's Door to anyone who's a fan of action-adventure games. 4.5 stars. Demon Throttle is a physical-only game exclusively for Nintendo Switch, which caught my attention immediately. I was also inspired by the tongue-in-cheek humor of the game and the extra retro 8-bit art style inspirations. A nod to classic top-down arcade shoot-'em-ups, Demon Throttle finds a dusty cowboy and a beautiful vampiress forming an unlikely duo to take revenge against a demon who kissed his wife.
That demon kissed my wife. Or something.
And stole her magical chalices. They play slightly differently, with the cowboy being a little easier and more consistent with his straight line firing, and the vampiress playing riskier but having higher damage output due to her short-range shotgun-style cone of bullets. Co-op is possible, but only when both players are in the same room. And although co-op does enhance the experience, the game feels good to play solo as well. Although each playthrough is pretty short, this game shocked me with how much replay value it offers, with many secrets to uncover and hidden paths to take through levels. and it all culminates in one of the silliest final boss fights I've ever seen. True to form as a classic shoot 'em up, Demon Throttle is pretty tough, but not the hardest game I've ever played, and the soundtrack is definitely a personal favorite of mine. I definitely recommend Demon Throttle for fans of the genre, although you'll have to order your physical copy online to play it, as your local game store almost certainly won't have it on the shelf. 4 stars.
This is the perfect place for us to do an awesome training montage, don't you think?
DK Bananza is an excellent 3D platformer and a great follow-up from the Nintendo Tokyo team that brought us Super Mario Odyssey in 2017. Although I didn't enjoy this game as much as Odyssey, and although I feel it overstayed its welcome just a bit, I do acknowledge that Bananza is absolutely best in industry when it comes to smooth, fluid 3D gameplay. The core gameplay mechanic, where DK can smash through and destroy entire levels of the game, is a technical marvel and feels like an insane achievement that only Nintendo's finest could pull off. Its garish art style is love it or hate it in my opinion, but it mostly worked for me, and the music offered plenty of highlights as well. The story takes a pretty distant back seat in a game like this, with NPCs babbling gibberish over text bubbles, a shtick from Nintendo that has started to lose some of its charm for me. Earlier I mentioned that this game was a little too long for my enjoyment, and I should also add, I did not complete the final boss fight in Bananza. It had an annoying run back and was weirdly a lot harder than the rest of the game, and frankly, I didn't feel that the game had adequately prepared me for it. So I just walked away. All that being said, I don't really go much for 3D platformers in general, so when I say I mostly like this game, I mean that as pretty high praise, and I do recommend Donkey Kong Bananza for fans of 3D platformers and for DK heads in general. 3.5 stars. You can't talk about Doom Eternal without talking about Mick Gordon's awesome soundtrack. This is the only video game music that I listen to outside of an actual game, with several tracks getting frequent rotation in my workout playlist. In fact, this game's soundtrack was so influential that it's considered to be a major influence in metal music everywhere, with its impact reaching way beyond just video game enjoyers. There's a lot of great music in this game, but the biggest standout is The Only Thing They Fear Is You, the track you heard on the way in here. Music aside, Eternal is a near-perfect arena shooter that rewards you for high-flying action and encourages you to hold forward at all times. Fueling the action are Eternal's signature glory kills, unique finishing animations for low-health enemies, which will have you dispatching Hell's Finest with insane, over-the-top hyper-violence. On top of the endorphin rush, glory kills also feed you health and ammo, further rewarding you for ripping and tearing your way through the denizens of hell. Along the way, id Software will arm you with a near comical amount of firepower, lending to endless emergent gameplay and flow state creativity. And to top it all off, Eternal offers a light smattering of surprisingly good puzzling and platforming. This game rips and tears like no other, and for my money, offers the high watermark for the franchise. 5 stars. id Software gave themselves a difficult task in following up Doom Eternal, but I think Doom the Dark Ages is a worthy entry into the series and a solid follow-up to Eternal. I talked about Mick Gordon's soundtrack in Eternal, and sadly, Gordon and id Software actually parted ways between games, and the Dark Ages music, although solid, doesn't quite hold up. The gameplay is also a slight step down in my opinion, with the newly added Shield Saw being the shiny new toy and the core tool for the gameplay loop. Leading with a shield means that Doom Guy is tankier than ever, but also a little more turtly and less aggressive. On the fun but gimmicky side, Dark Ages did add giant kaiju battles and dragon riding levels, but I didn't find either very satisfying and would eventually just wish I was back in the core gameplay loop. All in all, Dark Ages was a fun ride, even if it didn't quite live up to the high mark set by Eternal. 4 stars. Double Dragon Gaiden Rise of the Dragon. Oh my god, what a mouthful. You know what? I'll just say it. I don't know how many words is too many words for the title of your game, but 7 is definitely across the line. Okay, this is one of my favorite beat-em-ups I've ever played. I loved the oversized cast of this game. You'll start with 4 characters, and as you progress, you'll unlock 14 more, including lots of special enemy characters and even bosses. And the playstyles of the cast vary so widely that it adds a lot of replay value to the game. The combo system is really fun to play with and leads to more freedom and creativity than you might expect in the genre. Juggling enemies is an absolute delight, and teaming up with a friend for a wombo combo is even better. The game structure is also a little more complex than most beat-em-ups, as you fight your way through 4 levels in any order you choose. The rub is, the levels get harder as the game progresses. So if you find a particular level or its boss a little too sticky, you might want to play that level first. If you're a fan of beat-em-ups, this one is a must-play. 4 stars. Ember Knights might be the most slept-on game on this list. I can honestly say that this is one of my favorite action roguelikes I've ever played. And as far as gameplay goes, it even holds its own against heavyweights of the genre, like Hades. The action is smooth and fluid, and build paths are interesting and fun. The character progression is solid, and the game is tough, but very fair and balanced. Ember Knights doesn't have much of a story to speak of, and the music and art style, while solid and serviceable, don't add all that much to the game. However, when it comes to action games like this, I think those artistic elements are a little less important than the core gameplay and roguelike systems, both of which Ember Knights excels at. Another thing this game offers is co-op, a rare feature in this genre, and the game feels great to play either by yourself or with a friend. At $20, Ember Knights is a steal and offers a ton of replay value. 4 stars. In an interesting coincidence, next up is another top-down action roguelike that I like even more than Ember Knights, and truly one of my favorite games of all time. Enter the Gungeon. Dodge Roll absolutely knocked it out of the park on this one. The action is tough but fair and extremely polished, and by the time you can learn to survive the bullet hell, you'll feel like a total badass. On top of its excellent gameplay, Gungeon has beautiful pixel art, a memorable soundtrack, interesting world building, and as many puns as it does guns. The comedy may not work for everyone, but I personally love the campy gun-based humor. You'll find a shotgun shell that shoots shotguns. You'll face enemies that are mostly some form of bullet, and you'll even square off against a massive drag gun, spelled G-U-N, of course. Being a roguelike, each run will offer you different weapons, as well as different passive giving items, between which there are dozens of interesting synergies, many of which are not only powerful, but often also unexpected and hilarious. The sheer variety is stunning, with more than 200 guns and dozens of items to find. The story will see you guide 8 playable characters on a quest to find a gun that can kill their past, as each is haunted by an event they wish to erase. As you descend further and further through the floors of the Gungeon, each will offer you a boss fight, with each floor featuring several possible boss encounters. Each of the 8 playable characters also has their own starting weapons and passives, offering even more variety. I also want to add, Gungeon is the game that put the publishing studio Devolver Digital on the map for me, and since then, I've learned to trust their ability to spot interesting projects. Even if all their games don't resonate with me, when I hear Devolver, my ears perk up. 5 stars.
The past has been erased.
Exit the Gungeon is a strange follow-up to Enter the Gungeon. Although they have a lot in common, from the gun pun a minute humor to the art style, enemies, and even many of the guns themselves, Exit the Gungeon is actually an entirely different genre of game. This is an action platformer where you're tasked with ascending back up through the floors of the Gungeon. I definitely wasn't nearly as impressed with my trip back out, although it was a well-made platformer and overall an enjoyable romp. I just didn't find it nearly as memorable, and it certainly didn't hook me for hundreds of hours the way Enter the Gungeon did. 3.5 stars. Backrooms can be defined as liminal spaces, the places between the real and the surreal that feel like they could, but maybe shouldn't exist. This creepy horror game saw my wife and I, along with 2 friends, avoiding monsters and dangerous entities of all types and solving puzzles to escape the backrooms and hopefully return to reality. This is an ultra rare example of a game that I haven't finished and that I also played in early access. At the time of recording, I haven't played the very latest levels, which just released in October 2025, but this one feels more like a game I just haven't finished yet, rather than one I won't finish. Overall, this game mostly succeeds on vibes, with there being a little bit of indie horror jank and overall cheap production. But if you're looking for an eerie, unsettling game to play with friends, this is a pretty good one. 3.5 stars. Fall Guys is unironically one of my favorite video games of all time, and the game my wife and I have played the most of together. Our crew, the self-named Dub Squad, have played hundreds of hours together, with countless victory royales behind us. And although the game features stumbling beans as the playable characters, there's a surprising amount of skill expression through game knowledge, calculated risk-taking, and even some fancy movement tech. I've mentioned before that I'm not much of a completionist, but this is one of the rare games where I have every achievement on Steam, including the extra challenging Infallible for winning 5 shows in a row. I will say, now that the game has been out for a few years, and since Fall Guys exists as an online-only player versus player battle royale, I'm not totally sure how to recommend this game anymore. On the one hand, Fall Guys has now become a free-to-play game, and although I don't think the free-to-play model necessarily made Fall Guys a better game, in a way, it's even easier for me to recommend to anyone now since there's no barrier to entry. However, I'm not sure what the health of the game is, as that will depend on Fall Guys' player count. Partially full lobbies and long queue times never help a game's case, and both are bound to happen eventually. At any rate, Fall Guys is a stumbling, bumbling good time, and I think I'd recommend anybody to check it out at least once. I think you'll have a laugh. 4.5 stars. Furi is a bullet hell, shoot 'em up, boss rush, where your only job is to get good. Overall, it's just a really strong package. Nice visuals, a distinct aesthetic with a fun soundtrack, and very tight gameplay. There are no traditional levels in this game, just a series of 1v1 boss fights. I would rate this as one of the most challenging games on this list, so if you're not down for a tough time, I wouldn't bother with this one. 3.5 stars. Gorn is a hilariously violent VR first-person hack and slash set in a gladiatorial arena. The gameplay loop is pretty simple. You're dropped into a combat scenario with varied enemies, and you'll have one weapon at your feet to start the match with. Kill your opponents and earn the favor of the Emperor, as well as the crowd. Despite the simple premise, the sandbox nature of the gameplay means you can get incredibly creative and dispatch your foes however you'd like. All of the weapons are pretty fun and satisfying to use, although the bendy nature of all the melee weapons does take away a little bit of the impact, and sometimes made me feel like I was wielding an inflatable toy. Overall, I enjoyed Gorn, and it's one of the more fun VR games I've played, even if there's not a whole lot to it. 3.5 stars. I don't have a lot to say about Gravity Circuit. If you're an enjoyer of Mega Man games, I don't see how you could go wrong with this one. If you don't like those kinds of action platformers, you probably won't like this one either. The tight gameplay features buttery smooth platforming, as well as excellent combat, with lots of nods to Capcom fighters, from Ryu's Shoryuken to Zangief's spinning piledriver. Strong pixel art visuals and a rocking soundtrack put this game over the top as a worthy competitor to any Mega Man game, and a must-play for fans of the genre. 4 stars. In Hades, you'll take on the aid of the Olympian gods as Zagreus, attempting to escape from the underworld and reunite with your birth mother on the surface, all while eluding the stern, ruling gaze of your father, the titular Hades. When Hades dropped in 2020, I didn't immediately know I was playing my favorite single-player game of all time. But I do now. I could truly gush endlessly about Hades. The top-down combat is best in class. The roguelike account progression is perfectly paced. The 24 weapons offer a huge variety of interesting choices, with massively different playstyles. From the scoot and shoot adamant rail, Hades' take on a machine gun, to the defensive shield, to the balls to the wall aggression of the twin fists, anyone can find a style that suits them. And then there's the build paths themselves. You will receive boons from a host of Olympian gods, each of which are memorable in their own way. As each run progresses, you can build towards powerful legendary boons, or game-changing duo boons, where two gods come together to offer you unique, new abilities. To say that these systems are deep and wide would be a bit of an understatement. There are hugely varied ways to approach this game, and endless ways to win. Moving on from the gameplay, the art is all hand-drawn and absolutely gorgeous, and the painterly portraits for each of the gods and supporting cast that you'll meet are beautiful and charming. This visual appeal definitely helps as you dip your toes into a surprising extra element of this game, its light dating sim, which I won't spoil here. Next, I want to talk about Darren Korb's excellent soundtrack, which moves effortlessly back and forth from hard rock to whimsical theremin music to haunting acoustic ballads, and the fact that one man wrote all the music is just astounding. Finally, I want to talk about the story and voice acting, which go hand in hand. At the time of its release, Hades actually had the record for the most dialogue in any video game, which is impressive on its own, but doubly so when you realize that Hades has some of the best voice acting out there. But all that dialogue isn't just there to impress, it actually serves a purpose. There is a near endless algorithm that dictates contextual dialogue that you'll hear that will shock and surprise you. Maybe somebody mentions what killed you in your last run, or a particular enemy is insulted by the weapon you're carrying, or an NPC thanks you for completing a side quest for them. All this adds up to mean that you can play for dozens of hours without ever hearing the same line of dialogue twice. Hades is a monumental achievement in gaming, and possibly my favorite game of all time. Obviously, 5 stars. I also do want to mention, I speedran thousands of attempts in this game, with my best time being a modded 6:26, putting me in the top 100 fastest runners of all time for this game. Okay, I'm really proud of that. That's all. Back to the video. Supergiant Games doesn't typically make sequels, but after the success of Hades, and with their various teams still inspired with fresh ideas, they decided to go back to the cauldron for Hades 2. In this game, you'll be filling the shoes of Melinoi, the younger sister of Hades' protagonist, as she attempts to free her family from captivity and defeat the Titan Kronos. And although the gameplay does feel like more Hades, Melinoi has a unique style all her own. She's definitely less tanky than Zag, but also more powerful in many ways, thanks in large part to the newly added magic system, giving each weapon an enhanced Omega attack and Omega special, executed by holding the respective button down. Conversely, this also gives Melinoi an additional resource to manage, since your magic is fueled by your limited mana. Overall, the gameplay, the music, and the art direction from Supergiant are as flawless as ever, although I would say I think that Hades 2's narrative is just a little weaker than Hades' pitch-perfect story. Also, and this is just me, I liked most of the character portraits more in the first game, although only by a small margin, and I've heard plenty of people say to the contrary. That being said, Hades 2 more than justifies its own existence with its breadth of content, adding an entire second path to play the game through, and therefore doubling the amount of content from the first game, while adding dozens of new NPCs. For a closing note, Hades 2 retained basically everything that worked in Hades and expanded on it, and has already made its way onto the list for my favorite games of all time. 5 stars.
So what's the plan?
We're heating up with a hot streak of amazing games between Hades, Hades 2, and our next entry, Half-Life Alyx. This is easily the best VR game I've ever played, and it's not really close at all. It's so incredibly immersive and clings to the tried and true Half-Life formula of physics-based gameplay that works so well in previous titles, converting it flawlessly into virtual reality. It may sound strange to say, but Alyx is the first and only VR game I've played that felt like a full AAA video game that just happens to be in VR. The combat is really, really fun, the level design is immaculate, and the story and setting are just awesome, as expected for a Half-Life game. The only thing that upsets me about this game is the fact that Valve can still make incredible games, but we're just not getting any consistent output from them. If "I want more" is the only complaint you can think of, you've got yourself a pretty good one. 5 stars. Man, I was rooting for this one. For those who don't know, I am a huge old Halo head. I have played tens of thousands of hours in this franchise. Many years ago, I used to run and compete in tournaments, and at one time or another, I've played against some of the best Halo players alive. Coming up to the release of Infinite, I definitely had mixed feelings. I've played and enjoyed aspects of every Halo game I've ever played, but in my opinion, the series has not reached the heights of its former glory while it was being developed by Bungie. In those days, Halo was the biggest gaming franchise in the world. Ultimately, there were plenty of things I enjoyed about Halo Infinite, but clearly it did not set the world on fire. That being said, I definitely enjoyed the campaign a lot, and was impressed with how well an open-world Halo game really worked. The multiplayer, on the other hand, was a mixed bag for me. Without getting too into the weeds, I liked but didn't love Halo Infinite's multiplayer. I did play enough of it to reach Onyx in Ranked, which my friends and I expected to be able to do, and I enjoyed the quest, but then my friends and I pretty much walked away from the game at that point. If you love shooters, or if you're an old Halo fan like me, I think that the campaign is worth the purchase, and with the multiplayer being free to play, I would encourage anyone to check it out. 4 stars. High on Life is a hilarious first-person sci-fi shooter from the same studio that brought you Rick and Morty, and you can feel its imprint all over this game. Present are the same irreverent tone, babbling dialogue, and impressively deep sci-fi world building. The main gimmick of High on Life is that your guns talk to you, and each of them will have several abilities that will span basic damage output and varied utility and traversal tools. Ultimately, I found High on Life to be a very funny and entertaining game, and a pretty solid shooter that doesn't overstay its welcome. 4 stars. Hollow Knight is not only one of the greatest Metroidvanias of all time, but is truly one of the greatest indie games ever made. It's really a staggering achievement that a team of 3 people created this massive, interconnected game world that rivals anything any AAA studio has ever produced in the genre. From the one-of-a-kind visual tone, to the excellent haunting score, to the pitch-perfect gameplay, and the unbelievable mountains of lore hiding in plain sight, Hollow Knight is a masterpiece in basically every way, and it's one of my favorite games of all time. 5 stars. This is another one of those sequels with an impossible hill to climb. How do you deliver on one of the most anticipated sequels of all time? Well, if you're Team Cherry, with a ringing success, of course, in Hollow Knight Silksong. The gameplay, lore, music, and world design are all as good as we hoped, and most critical conversations around this game are really just trying to figure out if this is a perfect game or not, with difficulty, boss runbacks, and overall economy being potential detractors. However, Silksong is undoubtedly a landmark in indie gaming and another all-timer for the genre. 5 stars. Hey, while we're still here, I have a confession to make. I didn't beat this one. I made it all the way to Grandmother Silk, faced her 3 or 4 times, and was just like, nah, I don't want to do this. Like, I just decided I'd accomplished enough. So I went to YouTube and I watched somebody else finish it. I don't know. I feel kind of bad about this one. I'm not going to lie. I might go back still. Should I? Let me know in the comments if you think that it matters and if I should go back and beat this boss. All right. Thanks. Love you. Bye. Inscryption is an excellent game that is both very hard to describe and also hard to not spoil. I'll just say this game takes some very unexpected twists and turns and leave it at that. In Inscryption, you'll have 2 basic tasks in front of you. Escape the eerie log cabin you find yourself locked in, and win at the trading card game on the table, at peril of death. I really enjoyed my time with Inscryption, and I'd say if you're into deck builders or you're just intrigued by the spooky vibes of this game, you'll really enjoy it, like I did. 4 stars.
KeyWe is a game about 2 kiwi birds who work at the post office.
KeyWe is an adorable 2-player indie game where you and one friend control kiwi birds as they execute various tasks in an office. Set in the Australian outback, you'll find yourself sorting mail, sending ransom note style telegraphs, and typing letters on randomized keyboards. It sounds pretty mundane, but the gameplay is challenging and cute, and never so difficult that it becomes frustrating. It's also a perfect length, as you can beat it in under 10 hours. Jesse and I found KeyWe charming and fun, and we really enjoyed playing this together. 3.5 stars.
The company is hired.
In Lethal Company, you and up to 3 friends are tasked with raiding abandoned buildings on alien planets in order to salvage profits for the all-seeing corporation you work for. Come up short on any mission, and the corporation will off you and your crew. That is, if you even make it to Extraction, since each map is littered with all sorts of scary monsters, critters, and traps that are hazardous to your health. Now, I'll just say up front, Lethal Company is definitely not my type of game. I did enjoy playing this with my friends, but mostly because of the hilarious and memorable missteps we made along the way, and not necessarily for how good the game is. Lethal Company was very popular in 2023 when it came out, and I doubt I need to sell anybody on it. I can definitely understand this game's appeal, and I can appreciate it as a platform for emergent gameplay moments, but I like a game with a little more structure and more of a set endpoint that one can reach. Forgive my low score, and don't worry, Lethal Company will do just fine without me. 2.5 stars. In Limbo, you are a young boy trying to find his lost sister in a dark and dangerous world where death awaits you at every corner. It's a 2D platformer with very simple controls, and it features solid puzzle mechanics throughout. I played Limbo very recently, and I was quite impressed with it. It's moody and atmospheric, and there's a haunting narrative that you won't quite get your head around until the very last second. I definitely enjoyed this game, but I will admit that I got lost in a few puzzles and found myself going to YouTube for the answer, only to then genuinely ask the question, how did they expect me to see that? Now, please keep in mind, that was just my experience with the game. Your mileage may vary. Ultimately, though, Limbo was a cool experience that you can beat in 1 or 2 sessions. 3.5 stars. Huh. That's like 3 spooky games in a row. Okay. In Luigi's Mansion 3, you'll be visiting what is not a mansion at all, but in fact, a hotel. In the newest installment in the series, Luigi will team up with his goo-based clone, Gooigi, to solve puzzles, explore levels, find secrets, and ultimately vacuum up a whole bunch of ghosts. Even though the Mansion series is a little bit for kids, this is some of the most fun Jesse and I have ever had in a co-op game. We found Mansion 3 to be charming, surprising, funny, and the combat is the best the series has ever seen. This is a classic case of Nintendo firing on all cylinders, and I can't wait to see what this team cooks up next for the man in green. 4 stars. All right, another Nintendo entry here. Mario Kart World shipped with 2 main goals: to be as good as Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and to deliver an awesome new open world for Mario Kart fans to drive around in. And I think to some degree, it failed at both. It's smaller in scope with many fewer levels than 8, and the open world feels a bit empty and lifeless at times. Like, it's cool that it exists, there's just not very much that I find compelling to do in the open world. All that aside, Mario Kart World is a near flawless racing game, packed full of awesome maps, great characters and karts, and the driving is as good as it's ever been in the series. World is also really beautiful and runs buttery smooth on the Switch too, and features one of the best soundtracks of any video games ever made. Seriously, the music is that good. Whether you enjoy racing with friends, or checking out the new Battle Royale style Knockout Tour, or my personal favorite, racing against the clock in time trials, Mario Kart World is an awesome new entry in the series. I'm really excited to watch this game develop in the years to come, because if Nintendo can handle it like they did Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, there's still definitely plenty of room for Mario Kart World to become the best game in the series. 4.5 stars. Marvel Rivals answers the question, what if Overwatch but Marvel characters? And the result is a pretty awesome hero shooter. I got absolutely hooked on this game in early 2025, and my friend Zach and I had a blast grinding up to Grandmaster in one of the early seasons. I was a Scarlet Witch main, by the way, although I also very much enjoyed the ranged DPS characters Punisher, Hela, Winter Soldier, and Star-Lord. The gameplay is honestly so polished that no matter what type of character you like to play, there's something for you in this game. They didn't exactly reinvent the wheel with this one, but NetEase understood the assignment and knocked it out of the park with Marvel Rivals, and it's definitely one of my favorite games in recent years. 5 stars. I don't play a lot of mobile games, but Marvel Snap got its hooks into me deeply. In Snap, you'll duel an opponent in a trading card game where each of you is trying to win a best 2 out of 3 lanes using Marvel characters and their endless abilities to rack up points and dominate the board. Then, to ramp the action, as the match proceeds, each player can snap, doubling down the stakes of the match, which means that bluffing is also a key element of competitive play. For multiple months, I found myself chasing the upper ranks, aiming for the coveted infinite, and I made it quite a few times as well. With an ever-expanding roster of cards, now over the count of 300, there are near endless possibilities for deck building and theory crafting in Snap. Another great feature of the game is Snap's willingness to put lesser-known, deep-cut Marvel characters in the game, which often drives players to be interested in characters they wouldn't have otherwise known about. I will say, this game had its moments where certain balance changes could make the game frustrating, but the meta shifts so often that any sticking point probably won't last for long, due to people solving broken decks, or the developer just patching out problematic cards and combos. This is definitely the most fun I've ever had playing a card game, and it's easily in my top 3 mobile games of all time. 5 stars. Mega Man 11 is a pretty standard Mega Man game. I don't really have a lot to say about it. It feels slightly more modern than the old NES games, although it's not like those games needed much help. Obviously, the visuals are greatly improved, and per usual, I enjoy Capcom's art style, their excellent character modeling, and their always great music. If you like Mega Man games or action platformers in general, this is a good one. 3.5 stars. When it comes to Mega Man, I always appreciated the X series a little more than the NES titles. The fluid gameplay, advanced movement tech, and anime-inspired aesthetics always drew me in. Mega Man X was a seminal game in my development, and for much of my youth I considered it to be among my favorite games. Since I never played the sequel, it was fun to revisit this series as an adult nearly 3 decades later. Mega Man X2 was as good as I hoped it would be, and my hopes were high. Although released more than 30 years ago now, Mega Man X2 still holds up as a classic and is super fun to play. 3.5 stars.
I tell you, it takes
Metal Hellsinger answers the question, what if Doom, but Dance Dance Revolution? And it turns out, we got a pretty awesome rhythm-based first-person shooter. In Hellsinger, the soundtrack is not just a feature, but a core mechanic, showcasing absolutely killer death metal, with vocal contributions from artists belonging to System of a Down, Trivium, and my personal favorite, Lamb of God. Also, apparently there are DLC packs that add full-on tracks from Disturbed, Muse, Paramore, and even Depeche Mode? From a gameplay standpoint, Hellsinger is a pretty solid arena shooter where you're a demon tasked with killing the Red Judge, the ruler of Hell, and recovering your voice. You're given a solid arsenal that'll feel pretty familiar to any veterans of Doom or Quake, with the sword and Talking Skull being more original standouts. As you run and gun your way through Hell, You're given damage bonuses by shooting and slashing to the beat of the music, and you can rack up multipliers by maintaining streaks, similar to Guitar Hero and other rhythm games. Metal Hellsinger isn't the best rhythm game I've ever played, and it's not the best shooter I've ever played, but it's a pretty great combination of both. 4 stars. My very first impression of Metroid Dread was, wow, these controls feel clunky. And I stand by that impression, but once I cleared the initial hurdle of familiarizing myself with the game, I became very capable, and Samus felt like the sleek, powerful bounty hunter she's meant to be. Being half of the namesake for the Metroidvania genre, you'd expect a 2D Metroid to clear a very high bar, and I believe Nintendo absolutely were up to the task with this one. The world design is as excellent as ever, combat feels tight and satisfying, once you're used to the controls. Platforming and exploring is rewarding and fun, and the boss fights are impressive and memorable. If you can clear the initial difficulty curve of a slightly odd control scheme, Metroid Dread is another excellent entry in the Metroidvania canon. 4 stars. Mind Over Magnet is the brainchild of one of my favorite YouTubers, Mark Brown, the host of Game Maker's Toolkit. In this fun puzzle platformer, you'll use magnets to solve 50 puzzles. It's a simple concept that gets reworked and remixed in lots of really cool ways. As a first game from a solo developer, I think Mark should be viewed as a success. There's not much story to speak of, but the puzzles were fun and satisfying to solve without being too terribly difficult, and I enjoyed the simple, cartoony visuals. 3 stars.
Are expected to rise by 69 degrees.
So, for today's recipe,
Oh boy. I wanted to like my friend Pedro so much more than I actually did. In this shoot-'em-up platformer, you're led into violent confrontations with street gangs at the behest of a talking banana, the eponymous Pedro. At its best, the stylish action in this murder ballet will make you feel like John Wick and Deadpool had a baby. Once you get used to the control scheme, and until all the enemies start getting weirdly tanky. You see, this game, like Metroid Dread, has a bit of an obtuse controller layout, and it took me about half the game to start to get into flow state. This wouldn't be much of a problem, but about the time I was getting into it, more enemies with armor and shields start getting introduced, at which point you are forced to slow down and play methodically, meaning you can't do the thing you want to do, which is hold forward and stylishly dispatch your foes. I loved the humor, the visuals, and the music, and the gameplay does lead to some holy shit moments that made me feel like an absolute badass. But the wonky control scheme and odd pacing meant that I liked this game, but didn't love it. 3 stars. New Super Luigi U was released as a smaller entry to the new Super Mario Bros. Series, and while it's structured like a normal 2D Mario platformer, it definitely has a flavor all its own. Obviously, you pilot Luigi in this game, and he shows up here with his trademark physics established in North America's Super Mario Bros. 2, where he's much floatier in the air, but more slippery on the ground. As much as I enjoy playing as Luigi, I will admit it takes just a little getting used to, and frankly, the level design is overall a little more challenging than most of what you'll find in the Mario games, meaning it's tougher overall than most games in the series. Luigi U does feature a full-length campaign with over 80 levels, but each level starts you with only 100 seconds on the clock, so every level is short by design. Ultimately, I think Luigi U is an interesting and somewhat fresh take on an already great series, and worth playing for fans of Mario platformers. 4 stars. Nick All-Star Brawl answers the question, what if Super Smash Bros. But Nickelodeon? And the answer is a really fun and well-made platform fighter. From the ground up, this game is an obvious love letter to the early Super Smash Bros. Games, especially 2001's Super Smash Bros. Melee. And I think it's a fitting tribute, as well as a worthy addition to the genre. Ninja Turtles Leonardo and Michelangelo, Ren and Stimpy, and their show's Powdered Toast Man were some of my personal favorites in the cast, but there's lots of characters to fit anyone's playstyle. The controls are tight and responsive, and hit registration feels very clean and precise. The most notable shortcoming in this game is the lack of voice acting, making matches feel oddly quiet at times, and lacking some personality. Since this game's release, a sequel has also hit the market, so perhaps it's better to check out Brawl 2, but I had plenty of fun with this game. 3.5 stars. Ori and the Will of the Wisps is a masterful Metroidvania, and as you can see, a beautiful one to boot. Controlling Ori is a joy, as she's fluid and bouncy while still being very precise. I really loved all the different ways Ori can interact with the world, and she has all the moves you'd hope to gain in this genre, with a few unexpected ones as well. The game world is absolutely gorgeous to look at, and the soundscape and music make for a very serene and awe-inspiring experience. Any fan of the genre needs to catch this one, and if you like the aesthetic, this would make for a great first Metroidvania for anyone. 4.5 stars. Jesse and I truly cemented our marriage in the forge that is Overcooked 2. This game will have you flipping burgers in a kitchen where you have to race against the clock to complete every customer's order, and this game turns the simple act of cooking into a tense roller coaster of emotions. You and up to 3 friends will face increasingly complex recipes, ever-expanding kitchen layouts, and each other's very last nerves. Playing this with friends and loved ones will either make you or it will break you. I'm happy to report that Jesse and I made it all the way to the finish line, and we had an absolute blast along the way. 4 stars. I'm breaking alphabetical order here because I wanted to talk about this game after Overcooked 2. Moving Out is basically Overcooked, but for furniture movers. This is another one Jesse and I enjoyed immensely and had many, many laughs on. I don't remember liking it quite as much as Overcooked 2, but we definitely enjoyed our time with it. 3.5 stars.
Oh my god, this is so cute. Can you
Party Animals, while very charming and cute, was a pretty huge disappointment for me. After playing hundreds and hundreds of hours of Fall Guys with my friends and finally fizzling out. And don't forget we got that infallible achievement. Oh, that's crazy. I was really hoping Party Animals would be our chance to get the band back together. And although we enjoyed the aesthetics and had some fun moments, the lack of gameplay modes and the overly wonky controls meant that Party Animals was a game we bounced off of pretty quickly. I didn't hate it by any stretch, and perhaps it's gotten better since release, but I would say I hope to love Party Animals, but I just kind of liked it. 3 stars. You know, I'm recording these games alphabetically, but I'm realizing as I'm editing this that this is 4 casual games that you play with your friends in a row. Interesting. All right. Peak might be the friend slop / streamer game that I've enjoyed the most. You and your friends will ascend procedurally generated mountains to reach the titular peak. You'll have to travel through several biomes to succeed on a given run, and the entire game world is made anew every day, so there's always fresh content to explore. I really enjoyed the easy to understand UI, where all of your attributes related to health, stamina, and even status effects such as poison are tracked on one bar. In practice, this means you can focus on the most important thing, the climb. This game is not easy, and even the best laid plans can go awry on the mountain, but ultimately you can succeed, and when you do, it's pretty darn satisfying. 4 stars. Rounding out our casual games you play with friends block is Pico Park, a hilarious co-op puzzle platformer where up to 8 players can run amok on the screen. The art style is very simple, and that mirrors the gameplay, but the puzzles can be deceptively hard to complete, especially while trying to not let your friends down. Planning, timing, and communication are everything in this game, and your successes and your failures will have you giggling with your friends for the few hours of challenge that this game offers. 3.5 stars.
These next tests require...
I'm just going to say it plainly. I love everything about this game. The vibe, the aesthetics, the graphics, the writing, the humor, the gameplay, and of course, the puzzles. Just like the first game, Portal 2's difficulty curve is perfectly paced, and the game teaches you just enough as you go to be ready for the next challenge. This is one of those games that I seriously recommend any and every gamer play, whether you're taking on the solo game or playing the entirely separate 2-player co-op campaign, which is basically an entire second video game baked into Portal 2. Not unlike the rest of Valve's library, Portal 2 is a seminal experience and a perfect puzzle game. 5 stars. Ubisoft publishing a great Metroidvania simply was not on my 2024 bingo card. In The Last Crown, you'll play the role of a warrior named Sargon, the youngest and least experienced of a team of magic-wielding warriors, tasked with rescuing the prince from a kidnapping plot that has led him up into a cursed mountain. I've talked at length about several Metroidvania on this list, so I'll save some of the trouble of repeating myself and simply say, this is a great one. 4 stars. Pyre might be the biggest mixed bag of any game on this list. This will be another very strong example of a 3-star game. I do recommend it, but with reservations. Okay, so it's basically NBA Jam, but artsy, and with lots and lots of dialogue. You see, this is the game Supergiant made before Hades, and although a lot of the elements that helped make Hades great are present, missing is the great gameplay hook. The artwork, the story and its characters, and the music are all great. The world is unique and beautiful. The characters are charming, albeit flawed. And by the end of the game, you're thrilled to see your squad's ascent from purgatory and back into society. However, the gameplay, while serviceable, just wasn't very thrilling to me, and it lacked the kind of depth that would make me come back for more. By the end of the game, I was more excited to see the story conclude than I was to play any more of Pyre's take on basketball. 3 stars. Raft is an open sea game where you drift around on the ocean and slowly build your raft into a floating fortress. Although you start on a few simple boards, by the end of the game you'll have GPS, a self-sustaining farm and water purification system, and lots of cool trophies from your mini island hunts. In Raft, you'll explore islands and shipwrecks, and it just gets better and better as you play. I was surprised by the scope of the main campaign, and my friends and I had a great time on the high seas. Honestly, we had a lot of fun just figuring out how we would divvy up all the chores and tasks and learning who was good at what. I will say, as I promised I always would, we did not finish this game. It was one of those situations where we literally made it to the final boss, failed a couple of times, and we're just like, nah. I hate that it happened, but it's true, and I told you I would tell, so I did. 4 stars. In my opinion, this is another strong candidate for the most slept on game on this list. Raven's Watch is a co-op action roguelike that will see you and up to 3 friends battling a hellish invasion of nightmare creatures as 9 playable heroes from myth and lore, including Beowulf, the Pied Piper, and an especially awesome version of Red Riding Hood. This game is definitely tough as nails, and maybe not for the faint of heart, as I found it a bit more difficult than some of its peers like Hades or Cult of the Lamb. There's a lot more decision making happening in this game, as you spawn into a procedurally generated map where you'll have to race against the clock to farm up and gain strength, all while preparing to face that level's boss. It's a constant back and forth of risk and reward, and the ticking clock lends attention that just isn't present anywhere else in the genre. This was one of my favorite games of 2024 and is great solo, but even better with friends. 4.5 stars.
Okay, guys.
R.E.P.O is not the type of game I typically go for, but I'm glad I was invited to play with my friends because I did have a pretty good time with it. R.E.P.O feels like a slightly more cutesy take on Lethal Company, although I definitely preferred the moment-to-moment gameplay of R.E.P.O. The main difference is, in R.E.P.O, you're forced to carefully carry around fragile items that lose value every time they bump into walls and floors, which gives you a little more to do as you hunt for valuables, while still keeping an eye out for the various monsters that roam the halls. R.E.P.O also solves a big problem I had with Lethal Company, which was just getting lost all the time. In this game, they simply give you a map, and that simple change means I had a much better time without constantly having to figure out where to go. I had fun playing R.E.P.O, and my wife and her friends continue to play it, even though it came out much earlier this year. 3.5 stars. Secret of Mana is one of the greatest 2D RPGs of all time. And although it's not quite as good as the likes of Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy VI, its gorgeous pixel art, incredible soundtrack, unique real-time combat, and then groundbreaking multiplayer help set it apart. For context, many of the best RPGs of the era were turn-based, but Mana's combat system plays more like that of a top-down Zelda game, akin to A Link to the Past, and also features 3-player multiplayer, which was very unique for the time, especially considering that the Super Nintendo only had 2 controller ports, meaning this was only possible with the purchase of a multi-tap that raised the number of ports to 3. That being said, the game is still great single player, and while you rotate through which character you're actively controlling, the game's AI takes over the other 2 to help out in combat, with mixed results. Sometimes they give exactly the help you need, and sometimes they wander about away from combat. Also, I will say the AI soft-locked me one time in my playthrough when my party got split across a river and I didn't have a way to reunite them, which meant I had to reset my game. I mentioned the artwork and music earlier, and both are definitely standouts in the genre. The soundtrack seriously goes from banger to banger, and continued to surprise and delight throughout the game. Mana also famously uses the Super Nintendo's Mode 7, the console's pseudo 3D mode, allowing you to fly around the map freely once you've reached the late game. I will say, the third act is bogged down by a series of fetch quests that make the game's ending feel a bit unsatisfying, but I think it's still definitely worth a play, despite some small problems. 4 stars. I flipped the order of these games alphabetically because I wanted to talk about the one I really enjoyed first. Secret of Evermore is a spiritual successor to Secret of Mana, developed by the Square North America team. This game is alright, but you'll never see it pop up on a list of greatest RPGs anywhere. It lacks much of the charm of Mana, with the soundtrack being a notable downgrade. Also, there are multiple early challenges in this game that are absolute slogs to play through, with the maze-like bug muck being particularly frustrating, having whirlpools that are very difficult to dodge and that will send you teleporting back to the start of the area. And the first boss, Thrax, is also incredibly hard. I actually didn't finish this game, by the way. I made it to the very end, and while I had mostly spec'd my team heavily into magic, it turned out that one of the penultimate bosses is basically immune to magic, and I wasn't about to backtrack and grind up my account just to finish the game. As a final word, Secret of Evermore is a decent but flawed RPG that has as many warts as it does interesting ideas. Rounding out the lowest score on this list, Secret of Evermore, 2 stars. Slay the Spire is, in my opinion, the greatest deck-building roguelike I've ever played, and it is also, in my opinion, one of the most difficult games I've ever finished, even though the gameplay consists of simply playing cards from a deck. I played over 100 brutal hours of Slay the Spire and enjoyed every minute of it. The art style and music are definitely solid, but the game balance is perfectly tuned, and the challenge left me deeply hooked with the longing for one more run as I inched ever closer to victory. Lastly, a small extra bonus is that this game is very playable on mobile, so you can pick it up and play anywhere. And man, I recommend you do. 5 stars.
Open your eyes, Walker.
At a glance, Spec Ops The Line seems like a very run-of-the-mill, sepia-toned 2010s cover shooter, where your mission is to take down Colonel Conrad, leader of a battalion that's gone rogue and taken over the city of Dubai. However, as you delve further and further into the campaign, the madness of war unfolds around you and leaves you feeling like you've lived through Apocalypse Now. You'll be forced to make grueling and painful choices throughout the game, many of which lead to disastrous and unpredictable outcomes. The ending left me reeling, as it stands as one of the greatest twists in the history of gaming, alongside the likes of BioShock and Shadow of the Colossus. The gameplay is solid and fun and features some great set pieces, but the story is really what's memorable about this game. 4.5 stars. Owing to another solo dev darling on this list, Stardew Valley is a perfect farm sim and village management game, where you'll help restore a charming and cozy village and experience everyday quiet living. Farming, foraging, and restoring the local community center are all in a day's work, and you'll eventually earn the chance to date and even marry villagers. At first, you'll have just enough time and energy to plant a few crops and say hello to a few neighbors. But by the time a few seasons pass, you'll be operating acres and acres of farmland as a well-oiled machine with ever-increasing levels of efficiency and automation. After my time with games like Harvest Moon or even Farmville, I wasn't too terribly surprised by how addicting the farming was, or how the ticking clock of the perfectly tuned day-night cycles hooked me in. But I was pretty surprised by this game's fun and shockingly deep dungeon crawler, which makes it feel more like a pretty legit RPG. Stardew Valley's influence on video games can't be overstated, as nearly every cozy game on the market owes its success to Stardew and Animal Crossing. And the fact that one man made a game this great and this influential absolutely blows my mind. 5 stars.
Open your eyes and your mind to the realism of Nintendo 64 as you play.
Okay, this is the review that's going to get me into trouble. I'm just going to say it off the rip. In my opinion, the first few years of 3D gaming are some of the worst years in the medium since Nintendo shipped the Famicom and NES in the mid-80s. And, although I recognize it as a landmark video game, I do not think Mario 64 holds up in 2025. Now, when it came out in 1996, the world was stunned with its 3D graphics and buttery smooth gameplay. Miyamoto and his team were the tip of the spear in 3D platforming, and the fact that they stuck the landing is a crazy feat. I absolutely understand why Mario 64 is one of the most important games of all time, and I do not deny its legacy. I also do have some good things to say about it, so I'll start there. The movement feels fluid and smooth, and it's really fun to control Mario. The graphics are charming and cutesy, and the music is as good as it's ever been in the Mario series, which is pretty damn good, by the way. However, this game's inability to figure out the camera is just an unforgivable curse, and it will screw you over constantly as you play this game. On top of that, I mentioned that the controls are generally pretty great, but Mario is so damn slippery that often making small adjustments and taking small actions can be really tough. Like, it's impossible to just take one step in this game. I did finish Mario 64, but begrudgingly, as I felt I owed it to Miyamoto's legacy to complete the game. Mario 64 is an incredible achievement for its time, and its effects on the industry ripple to this day. This is another game where, if history is important to you, this is must-see TV. If not, just go play Mario Odyssey. 3 stars. The next 3 games are so old that they actually don't have trailers available anywhere online, so instead, I'm just going to include footage from the world records. It's not a stretch to say that Super Mario Bros. For the NES saved the video game market in North America. After the 1983 industry-wide crash at the tail end of the Atari era, retailers were saddled with stockpiles of knockoff consoles and cheap video games that no one wanted to buy. But 2 mustachioed plumbers changed all that. Fun fact, I was born in the same month that Super Mario Bros. Was released in North America, October 1985. And although I have played this game hundreds of times in my childhood, I decided to revisit it as an adult along Super Mario Bros. 2 and 3, and was pleased to see that I can still beat each in just one setting. These are some of the best and most important 2D platformers ever made, even if they are a bit light on story. Legacy aside, it's amazing how great it still feels to play Mario 40 years later. Mario is fast and agile, and the controls are tight and precise. The levels are great, and the music is even better. It doesn't get more iconic than this. 5 stars. If you had asked me my favorite game at any point in my childhood, I would certainly have answered Super Mario Bros. 2. Series staples Birdo, Bob-omb, and Shy Guy all had their start here, and this game was also the one that codified the game feel of Mario, Luigi, Princess Peach, and Toad, as each are playable characters in this entry. Mario is an all-rounder that's easy to control, Luigi can jump the farthest and is very floaty, but he's slippery on the ground. Princess Peach can hover midair and float over gaps, but she's slow on her feet. And Toad can run and dig the fastest, but he has the shortest jumps. This game has a fascinating development history that I won't get too far into here, But Mario 2 was actually born from another game released only in Japan that was reskinned with Mario characters and shipped in North America. Although developed by many of the same people who made Mario Bros. 1 and 3, Mario Bros. 2 basically isn't a Mario game at all, and the fact that it feels so quirky and different is a lot of what I love about it. 5 stars. Super Mario Bros. 3 is 35 years old and still in the debate for the greatest game of all time. There just aren't enough good things you can say about this game. The stage presentation is a vibe. The gameplay is razor sharp. The music is iconic. The power-up transformations are awesome. The levels are flawless. The art direction is amazing. The overworld map was innovative and brilliantly implemented. The hidden secrets in every level feel near endless, and the world-skipping flutes are one of the most memorable shortcuts in gaming history. This is a great example of Nintendo's very best doing what they do best. Super Mario Bros. 3 is a perfect game. 5 stars. In the Mario Maker series, the main draw is the fact that players can create endless levels to play, with the deep level creation tools offered by Nintendo. You can play levels in the style of various Mario platformers from throughout the decades, and seeing what people come up with is absolutely awesome to behold. This game also supports a pretty surprising campaign featuring 100 levels made internally by Nintendo, which serves as the icing on a pretty delicious cake. 4.5 stars. Eight years before they released Donkey Kong Bananza, the Nintendo Tokyo team shipped what is, in my opinion, the greatest 3D platformer ever made, Super Mario Odyssey. It's never felt better to pilot the Mustache Man, and along for the ride is Cappy, a magical hat that, when thrown, will allow Mario to transform into all sorts of various enemies and environmental objects. Notable examples include a giant T-Rex, an electric spark, and a bonsai bill. The Odyssey is actually the name of your ship, which you'll pilot around the globe in pursuit of Bowser and the yet again kidnapped Princess Peach. Although Odyssey has beautiful graphics and an awesome soundtrack, the gameplay is the star of the show here, and Mario has never been more athletic. His moveset is surprisingly deep, and it allows for some pretty technical movement that, while not necessary to complete the game, will reward the players who go all in, a fact that has made this one of the staples of speedrunning. Odyssey is another crowning achievement for Nintendo that surprises and delights all the way up until the credits roll. 5 stars. After the new Super Mario Bros. Franchise had begun to get a bit stale, Nintendo wanted to return to the 2D platformer with some new ideas. The solution? Wonder effects, which throw a huge twist into every single level of the game. This was definitely a much needed shot of creativity, and the result is something really fun and fresh. Interestingly, throughout development, Nintendo actually allowed any employee to submit suggestions for wonder effects, meaning that dozens of people outside the game's development team contributed novel ideas. And I'm glad they did, because we got to play something pretty awesome. 5 stars. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is the best-selling fighting game of all time, and a phenomenal celebration of not just Nintendo's history, but of gaming in general. I never thought I'd see the day that Nintendo's Mario battled it out with Konami's Solid Snake, Sega's Sonic the Hedgehog, and Microsoft's Minecraft Steve. And that's not to mention characters on loan from Square Enix, Capcom, and Bandai Namco. I have a lot of history with the Smash series, as I actually used to compete in and run local and online Smash tournaments here in North Alabama. It's one of the best party games ever made, and you can take it as seriously or as lightly as you want, and the game is absolutely willing to meet you there. Ultimate is perfection, whether you want to play a wacky fighter where you and your friends throw Pokeballs at one another, or whether you want to go Fox only, Final Destination, no items. I love this game, and it's probably my favorite fighting game of all time. 5 stars. Alongside Ember Knights and Raven's Watch, I want to nominate Spiritfall as a candidate for the most slept on game on this list. I'm also breaking alphabetical order again here, as it just felt too fitting to have Spiritfall follow up a Smash Bros. Game. This action platformer is a love letter to Super Smash Bros. Melee, with an excellent action roguelike under the hood. I have no idea how Gentle Giant accomplished what they did, delivering an action platformer that feels as good to pilot as any Smash game, while still offering a deep and robust roguelike with phenomenal builds that are extremely varied. In each run, you'll gain blessings from 7 deities, and you'll have 10 weapons to choose from, each of which make your character feel wildly different. I absolutely adored Spiritfall, and I have more than 160 hours with the game to prove it. 5 stars. The first thing I want to say about Superhot is that I played it on PC, and although I had a great time with it, I wish I had played it on VR. From what I understand, it's one of the great VR games of all time. In Superhot, your movement and time are tied together, meaning you can freeze your movement and freeze time to dodge bullets and other incoming attacks. This game basically makes you feel like you're a combination of Neo from The Matrix and John Wick, and maybe some third Keanu Reeves character. Superhot is pretty light on narrative, and the premise is simple, but the gameplay is really fun and unique, and I can truly say I've never played anything quite like it. 4 stars, maybe more stars in VR. I've mentioned before that I don't play a lot of open world, big RPGs, but I had to check out Breath of the Wild. The sweeping, epic score, the vast and mysterious landscape, and the gorgeous art style all drew me in. Not to mention, everyone and their uncle was saying this was one of the greatest games of all time. And you know what? I have to agree. I mentioned a few of this game's strengths already, but the thing that blew my mind time and time again was the endless amounts of interlocking systems working cohesively in this giant sandbox. There were so many moments where I would wonder, will this work? Only to realize that, yes, the developers thought of that, and it works perfectly. Use a flamethrower in high grass? It's going to catch on fire. Let the fire burn long enough? It eats up all the grass and the fire goes out. Or what if it starts raining? Yep, that puts out fires too. And speaking of fire, if you're in a cold climate, you can survive the weather by equipping a flaming sword. And if you're standing in a puddle, watch out for electric enemies. And I haven't even begun to mention all the insane tools that the developers let you play with. Magnesis can manipulate any metal object. Remote bombs can be generated, thrown, and detonated at will. Stasis can freeze objects or even enemies in time, and Cryonis allows you to create blocks of ice. To say the least, Link is supremely powerful in this game if you're able to use all of the tools at your disposal. I also want to talk about the pacing and spacing of content in this vast world. From the very start of the game, you're cut loose and free to roam in any direction. And Nintendo's developers did such an incredible job placing interesting things around the map that I always felt myself being drawn to 5 or 6 different locations at the same time, and I was thrilled to go and explore each of them. Lastly, I want to comment on the climb anything nature of this game. Breath of the Wild truly fulfilled the go anywhere dream of an open world RPG, and going there always feels amazing. There's lots more I could say about this game that's already been said, but I'll end by saying there's not many feelings more satisfying than climbing to a peak in this game and drifting to your next adventure on Link's glider. Five stars. Tears of the Kingdom is magic. The fact that they even attempted to make a sequel to the Breath of the Wild is crazy to me. Like, how many more new ideas do you have to justify a whole new game? Honestly, that saxophone might have been enough of a reason. But my God, did they ever pull it off. First off, Link has a brand new set of powers at his disposal. Fuse allows you to combine any two weapons or shields. Ascend lets you travel upwards through any surface, a tool so powerful it was first used as a dev tool. Recall lets you rewind time on any object in the game. How did they do that? And all that is before I even mention the insanely game-breaking Ultra Hand, which lets you fuse any items together, allowing you to build contraptions that are limited only by your imagination. People have built some absolutely insane stuff in this game over the years. From the world-famous personal air scooter, yes, I used this in my playthrough and it was a godsend, to bomb-dropping airships, to giant walking mech suits. All this would have been enough to justify Tears' existence, but they also added two new massive game worlds, one above and one below Hyrule. Seriously, it's basically triple the game, and that's especially true in the depths, which is like an entire game world unto its own. Diving down to the depths for the first time is one of the most memorable moments I've ever experienced in a video game, and one I'm sure I'll never forget. Lastly, I want to talk about the story because the overall story of Breath of the Wild didn't really stick with me. Ganon's kidnapped the princess, go save her, etc. Whereas the story in Tears of the Kingdom literally brought me to tears. And I'll just say this, calling the game The Legend of Zelda has never been more justified. Her story is absolutely awesome in this one. Nintendo decided to make a direct sequel to one of the greatest games of all time, and somehow did not make it just feel like more Breath of the Wild. Absolutely insane. 5 stars.
In a Hyrule, torn asunder.
Echoes of Wisdom is a top-down HD 2D game where you finally pilot Zelda and not Link. The core mechanic of this game is that, using her magical staff, Zelda can summon basically any object or monster in the game, with the only catch being that you must encounter items and defeat enemies before you can add them to your lineup. This means you can potentially solve puzzles and overcome challenges in many different ways. However, I will confess, and this is perhaps a knock on my creativity, but I found myself using many of the same tools again and again. Like, I spawned a lot of beds and trampolines in this game, y'all. And once I got 2 or 3 powerful enemies to summon at my disposal, they seemed to be able to handle almost any combat encounter with relative ease. To the game's credit, it does occasionally have areas where you are forced to reach deeper in your bag to solve puzzles, and I think these areas definitely stand out in a good way. Another reason I use the same tools over and over, and I don't think you can honestly talk about Echoes without bringing it up, is surprisingly the extremely frustrating UI in this game. I don't find myself outright disagreeing with a lot of design decisions in Nintendo games, but the choice to place every single Echo into one row is baffling. I feel like you could have improved this menu in a dozen different ways, each of which would be child's play to implement for studios like Nintendo and Grezzo. Grezzo, by the way, is the Japanese studio that co-developed this game alongside Nintendo, as well as the recent 2D HT game Link's Awakening, and they were founded by Koichi Ishii, the director of Secret of Mana from earlier in this list. Just a little fun fact for you. Overall, though, the presentation was great, the music was fantastic as ever, and Zelda felt good to control. I just found myself a little bored by the end of the game after using the same few tools so many times over. 3.5 stars. The Lost Vikings is a fascinating one-of-a-kind platformer and an absolute hidden gem of the early 90s. First of all, the studio that made this game, Silicon and Synapse, later became Blizzard. In fact, for you MOBA sickos out there, you may already be familiar with these characters, as they were featured in Blizzard's underrated Heroes of the Storm. And in both games, the core gameplay hook is the same. You have to navigate the game world controlling 3 characters at the same time. Looking at the characters and their abilities, if you took Eric the Swift, Balog the Fierce, and Olaf the Stout, and combined them into one character, the Lost Vikings would be an average and forgotten platformer. But it's precisely what your characters can't do that makes the gameplay so compelling. Eric can run and jump, but he has no way to defeat enemies, and he's vulnerable to any attacks. Balog can dispatch foes with his sword and bow, but he's stuck on the ground and has no defense. And Olaf can defend himself with his shield, although he's also grounded, and he has no weapons to attack with. So as you proceed through each level, you'll have to constantly cycle between all 3 Vikings, taking advantage of each of their abilities. It'll test your wit, and occasionally will demand some pretty precise platforming and timing, and each puzzle is incredibly satisfying to figure out. With an absolute banger of a soundtrack, The Lost Vikings is one I absolutely loved from 1993, and I think it's still worth checking out. Frankly, I'd like to see a new one. 4.5 stars. By the way, if somebody knows how to pronounce this guy's name, Balog, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from some Northern Europeans. At a first glance, The Messenger comes across as a pretty standard 8-bit style platformer, harkening back to Ninja Gaiden. But in short time, the game upgrades to 16-bit, and the story goes absolutely bonkers off the rails, introducing the player to time travel and jumping genres into a light Metroidvania. I dug The Messenger, and it surprised me more than a few times. 4 stars. Unfortunately, the Plucky Squire is another game I hope to enjoy more than I did. Its slow start and drop-dead easy difficulty didn't help in my opinion, although Squire had some moments I did enjoy, with a few satisfying puzzles and occasionally funny writing. In Plucky Squire, you're the protagonist of a children's book where you go on a pretty standard adventure to defeat an evil wizard. Without spoiling anything, that adventure gets derailed, and you'll be expected to defeat all kinds of new threats with Plucky's fountain pen sword, both in the 2D book and also in the 3D realm of the desk that the book sits on. The high points of this game for me definitely revolved around the word-based puzzle solving, where you can pick up words in the picture book and rearrange sentences, changing things in the game world. I was surprised a few times by how open the system was, and that the developers anticipated players trying to break it in a few interesting ways, and actually accounted for those choices. I think ultimately, I'm probably not the target audience for this game, and I bet if you're young, or you're just young at heart, you'll probably enjoy this one. 3.5 stars. The first thing I want to say about The Witness is that I didn't finish it, and I have 0 regrets. The Witness is legitimately one of the hardest puzzle games, or maybe just one of the hardest games in any genre that I have ever played. On a beautiful island, you'll walk around solving line puzzles and taking in the scenery. Over time, the island will show you new types of puzzles as you gain access to new areas, and each area will teach you new rules that will be folded into the following section. I recommend playing this game with a guide for one specific reason, just to make sure you don't play the sections of the island in the wrong order. I did this and spent quite a few very frustrating hours trying to understand why it felt like the game hadn't properly taught me how to solve the puzzles I was looking at. Then as you progress to the end of the game, you'll face puzzles that include elements from all of the previous segments at the same time, making for some absolute brainbusters. The Witness is a tricky game to review and score because I want to recommend it, but I'm not always sure who to recommend it to. If you want to explore a beautiful island with a super chill and slightly eerie vibe, or if you're a glutton for punishment, I definitely think The Witness would be a good fit. Play at your own risk. 4 stars. As a certified old person who grew up in 90s arcades, I'm always down for a beat-em-up starring Splinter's boys Leo, Mikey, Donnie, and especially my guy, the psi-wielding lunatic himself, Raphael. He's cool, but rude. From a studio that's really starting to come into their own, Tribute Games' TMNT Shredder's Revenge is, at first glance, another solid entry in the franchise. But the moment you get the controls in your hands, you realize that this game has redefined what a modern TMNT beat-em-up feels like. Offering some defensive tools and adding a combo system with a special meter, the gameplay feels more open and refined than any other Turtles game to date. Speaking of the Turtles, they feel more varied and unique than ever, with characters having stats for range, speed, and power. By the way, you know my boy Raph hits like a truck. He's gotta be all power. As an extra treat, you'll also be able to play as quite a few non-Turtles in this game, including, awesomely, Splinter, April O'Neil, and hockey enthusiast Casey Jones. In the last few years, we've been blessed with quite a few solid games in this genre, and Turtles is among the very best of them. 4 stars. Trek to Yomi is quite the mixed bag. I adored the art style, the setting, the story, and the lore of this game, but the combat had some major flaws. While at first pretty exciting, as the game progressed, I found that tougher enemies seemed to all only really have one consistent way of defeating them, which was just using the parry and counter combo. Consistently striking first would result in failure, and every enemy in the game was weak to parry, so I basically just one-tricked my way through this entire game. Gameplay aside, the aesthetic of Trek absolutely rules. It is a visual treat of 2D action, and the classic samurai revenge story and mythical Shinto lore really work together nicely to tell a surprisingly compelling story. If you're really drawn to the Kurosawa-inspired art style, and you're not a huge stickler for gameplay, I actually think this game is kind of awesome. 3 stars. No video game has ever physically injured me the way Trombone Champ did. Seriously, I was in a pretty good amount of pain while trying to finish it. Maybe it's because I'm old? Just to clarify, I played on mouse and keyboard with my right hand on the mouse being the one experiencing the pain. Okay, with that out of the way, I can honestly say I enjoyed Trombone Champ a lot. And this game basically just answers the question, what if Dance Dance Revolution, but trombone? And honestly, I'm here for it. I was a band kid growing up. Trombones are cool. In all seriousness, this game is quite gimmicky and simple, but I think it's inherently very fun to play and very funny to watch. One of the most comical aspects is that instead of the game spitting out sounds to let you know you've failed, Trombone Champ is happy to let you play any note you like, so you'll constantly slur and dance around notes, or just play wrong or mistimed notes altogether. Surprisingly, Trombone Champ actually has some lore, with baboons weirdly and unexplainedly circling around the periphery of the game, all while you delve further and further into the madness that is the Tromboverse. 3.5 stars. No matter how you slice it, Tunic is one of the greatest Zelda-like action-adventure games ever made. But this game has one incredible trick up its sleeve that makes it a one-of-a-kind experience. An in-game manual. A throwback to when video games actually came with physical manuals, including one as a core mechanic was an absolute stroke of genius, and it's perfectly executed. At the start of the game, most of the manual is illegible. At the start of the game, most of the manual is illegible, but as you learn the language of the game world, you'll decipher more and more of its pages. Often, you'll learn something from the manual that you didn't realize was available to you the entire game and hidden only behind your lack of knowledge, including a fast travel mechanic that was available at a simple button press. A reveal that blew my mind. The combat is difficult but rewarding and never unfair, and the boss fights are pretty great as well. Top that all off with some great art and music, and you've got a recipe for an awesome adventure. 4.5 stars. Turbo Overkill is a stylish and slick retro boomer shooter that's perfect for any fan of Doom or Quake, or just for anyone who loves a good chainsaw leg. In a neon-tinged dystopian future, you'll take on the role of Johnny Turbo, a half-cyborg mercenary who, well, I don't really know what the story is at all. It's really not the point. The actual point is, you'll shred through levels at breakneck pace as you dash, jump, strafe, and chainsaw leg your way through hordes of enemies. Even though it lacks much in story, a distinct retro cyberpunk art style and excellent action carry Turbo Overkill, which I enjoyed immensely. It's thrilling, challenging, and consistently funny. 4 stars. In a move that surprised me greatly in 2018, EA published a cute and charming co-op platformer. Unravel 2 sees 2 doll-sized characters made of yarn navigate a hazardous human world, while in the background the true narrative happens with 2 children running away from an abusive home. As your story unfolds, the player characters will occasionally cross paths with the children and sometimes help them, albeit inadvertently, with your characters posing as some sort of a guardian spirits for the children. The gameplay sees the 2 characters strung together by a single strand of yarn, which you can use to conquer endless puzzles. You might find yourselves taking turns swinging like Tarzan, or one of you might help the other climb out of a pit. Despite the abilities the yarn provides, being tethered together also means you can only be so far apart, an interesting limitation of the characters that the developers use in myriad ways through Unravel's 5 to 10 hours of gameplay. My wife and I really enjoyed Unravel 2, although she did skip the ending of the game, right after we beat it. She mashed A on her controller to skip the ending. I'm stunned. I'll never get over this moment. Jokes aside, I think plenty of couples, friends, or even parents and their children could enjoy this one. 4 stars. In Untitled Goose Game, you are a horrible goose who wreaks havoc on a charming English village. Set in one single day, you'll go on a small adventure that'll have you stealing things from the townsfolk, ruining a man's morning newspaper, or my personal favorite, tricking a shopkeeper into believing that a neighborhood boy has stolen from her. The art style and music are like the village itself, simple but charming. Running around honking and just being an overall menace is way more fun than it has any right to be, and my wife and I laughed endlessly as we passed the controller back and forth throughout this game. Also, I should mention but since release, a 2-player mode has been added that I'm sure made the game even better. Untitled Goose Game is a perfect little game that you can beat in a few hours and that I recommend every gamer check out. 5 stars. Wow, I liked Vampire Survivors a lot more than I thought I would. Honestly, I expected a simple, turn your brain off game that would eat up 10 or so hours of playtime for me. I mean, the core gameplay loop really just involves walking around in a flat, top-down world with most of your weapons auto-firing for you. However, by the time I was 96 hours in, I had realized that Vampire Survivors was way deeper and way more fun than I had anticipated. Heck, even though I'm approaching 100 hours, I only have 142 of the 243 achievements in this game. I'll say that again, Vampire Survivors has 243 achievements on Steam. As far as the gameplay goes, you try to survive and ramp your power as the game naturally ramps the difficulty over time, with a boss showing up at 30 minutes in for each run. There's lots of levels to explore, each with its own unique gimmicks, enemies, and secrets to unlock. The art style and story are pretty bare bones with an 8-bit visual aesthetic and no real narrative to speak of, but the music rips, the builds are fun to tinker with, and the roguelike account progression is decent, albeit simple. Ultimately, Vampire Survivors spawned an entire new genre, with newer follow-ups like Mega Bonk owing their bones to this game. 4.5 stars.
Anybody out there? It's shelter in the clothes, but we can't go back.
We Were Here Together is a 2-player co-op puzzle game with one really interesting conceit. 2 players solve puzzles together, but neither can see what the other sees. You're equipped with radios so you can speak at all times, but you'll only be able to describe what you see, and the 2 of you will need to combine the information in front of you to solve each puzzle. This game got pretty hard at times, and I could definitely see it causing a few divorces, but Jesse and I finished it, and we're stronger than ever for it. It's one of the most unique puzzle games I've ever played, and it was mostly well made with an attractive visual style. 4 stars. Yakuza 0 is one of those games where you can just do anything. Set in the late 80s fictional Japanese cities of Kamurocho and Sotenbori, you'll find yourself beating up street thugs, tangling with criminal enterprises, playing baseball, racing slot cars in an insanely deep slot car league, and even singing karaoke. And honestly, I'm barely scratching the surface here. You can really feel the hustle and bustle of a crowded Japanese city in this game, as NPCs and points of interest are so densely packed that you can hardly look in any direction without seeing something interesting to get into. I enjoyed my time with Yakuza, but ironically, and although this is the last game on this list, it's another one I didn't finish. I just found that there were a few too many long cutscenes for my taste, a feature that others might find really attractive. If you like playing an open world RPG while also watching a Japanese crime thriller, I promise you'll have an awesome time with Yakuza 0. 3.5 stars. Wow, when I started this project, I had no idea I'd end up clearing the 2-hour mark. I also didn't realize this video would take the better part of a month to produce. If you're still here, I just want to say thank you. I really appreciate your time and attention, and I hope you've had fun. I said at the onset that my main goal was to spread passion for gaming, so if you've had a good time, feel free to like the video, and I'll know I reached you. Furthermore, if you decide to play a game based off of a recommendation here, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you, and it would really make my day. Okay, that's it. Enjoy gaming, and have a great day.